now 6 p.m. This is Tuesday, February 18th, 2014, and this is a workshop of the Garland Independent School District Board of Trustees. A quorum is present, and notice of this meeting was posted as required by law. Please join me for the pledges. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. Let me give some information. I've had several phone calls about what a workshop is, because normally what we have are work sessions and regular meetings. Work sessions are generally on the second Tuesday of the month. Regular meetings are the fourth Tuesday of the month, and include items that have been pre-scheduled, items that will eventually get on our consent agenda for the second meeting of the month are usually discussed in the first meeting. Recognition of awards of excellence are usually given in a second meeting. In both meetings, however, we now have citizens' input. I call it citizens' input. Most people call it a public forum. This is something relatively new in our district. Initially, many years ago, the public forum was scheduled at the back of the meeting, and there was only one a month. This board, the superintendent, does believe, very much so, in a word that's very popular now called transparency. I really call it good government. The ability for the citizens to know what we're doing. These are tax dollars. In many cases, the highest tax dollars are paid not to the city, not to the hospital district, not to the community college, but to the school district. So we have, in each of our meetings, we have a public forum. Citizens can come and address us on any topic they wish at both meetings. In a workshop, generally we would be sitting down where the audience is today. We'd have a U-shaped table, and we just discuss items in general, generally for a specific topic or two that takes more than the time that would normally be allotted in a board meeting. And that's what we're doing this evening, discussing the facilities assessment and a possible calling of a bond. However, because of the importance of this meeting, we as a board and the superintendent felt, one, we needed to televise this meeting, so citizens who could not make it would certainly be able to hear our discussion. It's a little bit unusual, but it's the first, and I believe we will now be televising every meeting. That's another thing that this board has done with the superintendent, is started in October televising all our meetings. First time in the history of GISD, again, following transparency, good government. That's how we want to do it in the future, so everybody knows what's going on at every meeting that we have. So with that, let's go to item 3. It's an information item, update on facilities assessment. Mr. Drone. And as he's getting ready, just a couple of items. One of the things that some of the slides that you're going to see, one of the ones that stood out to me as I read it, it's one of the first slides. It's about district facts, and it talks about the age of our buildings. And our average age of our elementary schools is 35 years, and that includes our 2 pre-Ks, which are relatively new. Our middle schools are 39 years old on average, and our high schools 37 years on average, and our other educational facilities are 48 years. You'll be seeing that slide, but that's what this is about. We need to do work on these facilities. These are not new campuses in most cases. These are aging campuses that require a lot of improvements. So, Mr. Drone.
Yes, sir. Mr. Glick, board members, Dr. Morrison, appreciate being here tonight. What we want to do tonight is just kind of just bring this back full circle, kind of look at the entire process and the recommendations, and just kind of bring it up again for you all as you all go into your deliberations about no-go, no-go, what's going to be included, those types of things. So this will be a review that we're going to go through tonight. And please stop me if you have questions. So again, we've done our introductions. Chris is here this evening, myself, Doug, and Heather, so we have a full cadre of folks to answer questions. Jennifer is also here tonight, Jennifer Brown. So in April of 2013, Garland ISD hired Huckabee. On May 10th, we had a kickoff meeting with district maintenance staff to review the process and engage their involvement and participation. June 6th, Huckabee held a kickoff meeting with the curriculum staff to review their part in the process and discuss their involvement. And then on the 10th of June, we started with our consultants, started to do the field work, the boots on the ground portion of the assessment. June 24th, we met again with the curriculum staff to review and to begin development of a building program by grade level for the schools in the district. And then between the 15th and the 5th of, July 15th and the 5th of September, we met with all the campus level administrators to talk specifically about their facilities they were the CEO of, if you will. Between August 13th and November 25th, we met with representatives of the different departments within the district to gain their insight and the district's needs from their perspective, from their respective curriculum and their support service viewpoint. And so you can see the list of the folks, the different departments we met with there. On August 13th, we came and gave you an update of our progress. We did that again on October 8th. And then in December 17th, we presented the final draft of the facility assessment to the Board of Trustees. There were several different informational meetings that were held as part of this process. So on October 23rd, we had the first public meeting of the facilities assessment at the Curtis Caldwell Center. I think it was a very well-attended meeting. The facilities assessment itself was posted on the website on December 20th of 2013 on the district's website. And then February 4th, we had a follow-up public meeting, this time at Naaman Forest High School, to discuss the findings of the facility assessment. And then we presented the community survey to the board, or Boss Elise did, on February 11th, last week. So you have that information to kind of give you a sense where the community is. You know, we talked about the boots on the ground process. Part of this process, we walked every campus in the district, not just the educational facilities, but all your other academics that may not be a grade level type of facility, your athletic facilities and your administrative facilities. And we've talked before about the 28 different components that covered. You can see that list here, but it's quite extensive and really tries to get the pulse of everything about that building, every different system within any particular building or site. As Mr. Glick talked about, some of the district facts, the elementary schools being 35 years old, middle schools are average of 39 years old, high schools an average of 37 years old, and your other educational facilities, which are usually repurposed other campuses, former education facilities, they're 48 years old. And those ranges were from 63 years for your elementary schools, 63 years old to a half a year old. The middle schools range from 54 years old to 16 years, and the high schools range from 77 years to 11 years. So there's a pretty wide disparity to get to that average number that we talked about. So some of the things that we noted in the assessment, certainly it's not everything, but just to kind of give you a general picture of some of the things we noticed with regard to accessibility and building codes. Except for the most recent facilities, many accessibility elements on the campuses were not compliant with the Texas Accessibility Code, which governs access requirements for physically challenged persons. Except for the most recent facilities, campuses do not have ramps to the stage and have addressed access to the stage with lifts. Many of the lifts that do exist have railings that are non-compliant. On the site, approximately 35% of the school facilities have non-compliant accessible parking spaces due either to slope exceeding the maximum allowable, improper signage, or improper widths. And then we talked, more specifically about some of the campuses. So on sites, approximately 50% of the schools have some doors that are not accessible due to having steps leading up to the doors. And so there's a list of what those campuses are. Also, with regard to sites, we talked about more than 75% of the sites of the elementary school soft surface playgrounds are not currently accessible due to either playground edging, blocking the accessible route to the playgrounds, or not having accessible walks to the playgrounds. And so there's a list of those campuses. We also talked about, here's that same list from before. Sorry, that's repetitive, but here's the list of the campuses. The soils and foundations, 4 of the campuses have crawl space foundations with floor framing that exhibited some evidence of steel corrosion. So we've listed those. Sealants and asbestos. Asbestos-containing materials are known to exist in some of the facilities as identified in district reports. These products are identified and should be appropriately removed before any future work in those affected areas is undertaken. And then we also talked a lot about the windows, and that many of those windows are single-pane steel frames, and the glazing putty that's used in there is asbestos-containing. It is a challenge when you do any kind of a glazing replacement project. It becomes an abatement project, which drives your cost substantially on that. So it's something to be addressed. And further, those steel windows often have missing hardware or in fact are no longer operable. We talked a lot about door hardware as well, and that as many as 80% of the classrooms do not have the push-button lockdown capability at the door, requiring the facilities to manage their lockdown procedures a little bit differently or leave doors locked all the time. Most of the campuses built prior to 1990 have door hardware that is not ADA compliant. Millwork, finishes of millwork. The millwork in many facilities require replacement. The items assessed are non-compliant with accessibility codes, or damaged, or have been subjected to moisture, causing warping, bowing, or separation of the major components. Security, all but 8 of the campuses are in need of a secure vestibule to provide a higher level of building access control. Most of the campuses have varying levels of need related to general campus safety from a global standpoint to protect students and staff and the building infrastructure. Perimeter fencing on campuses was limited. Redesigned fencing is the first step in establishing an effective perimeter that kind of demarks between the public and the private space, deters trespassing, and increases the likelihood that somebody trying to cross that line and do harm would be discovered sooner rather than later. It slows down their access a little bit, delays that access. Current exterior surveillance offers limited coverage of the exteriors of the buildings. It needs to be improved at the drop-off and pickup zones, recess areas, and athletic building areas. Also in security, the telecommunications rooms that support the delivery of the data, the voice, and the security systems lack room security in some cases, and they often lack cooling systems to lengthen the life of that equipment in there. Intercom coverage of the exterior of the schools was found to be limited in coverage around pickup areas and drop-off areas in the playgrounds. From a mechanical standpoint, there are certain life expectancies of different systems, and chilled water systems have about a 25-year expected life. There are 25 facilities within the district whose chillers and the chilled water pumps are approaching that age, or will within the period of this bond approach the end of their useful life, and the replacement is recommended on those items, and they're listed. Those campuses are listed here. 25 years useful life recommended with regard to hot water systems, and there's 14 campuses that need to have boilers and some of the hot water pumps of those systems replaced in the near future. DX equipment has a typical useful life. The DX is the rooftop equipment of 15 years. Almost all your campuses have some level of rooftop equipment on there, and 26 of those, the entire system is composed of rooftop equipment. And most of that exceeds the 15-year service life and is in need of replacement. So we've listed the campuses there that show that need. Electrically, distribution systems typically have a lifespan of 20 to 30 years, and 29 of the facilities have obsolete panels, transformers, and/or switchgear that need to be replaced in the near future. And those campuses are listed here as well. We also talked some about exterior lighting, and there's 25 campuses that need some improvement on the exterior lighting, and those are listed here. Your lighting throughout in the interior of the building is in pretty good condition due to many recent renovations, and there was a lot of lighting that were included in those past renovations. All the ballasts are electronic, and the standard, your fluorescent tube bulb size is a T8, which is fairly common. The addition of exterior lighting, however, at 23 campuses is recommended. Plumbing, except for the most recent additions, many of the restrooms are not TAS compliant and are in need of complete renovations. We talked some about that last time and showed you some images of kind of what's involved in that work. 90% of the sewer mains throughout the district are original to the campuses in which they're located. Many of those mains are experiencing pretty regular blockage issues and are being recommended for replacement. And then 60% of the district's facilities have plumbing fixtures that are needed replacement as well. We looked at the lifespan with regard to fire alarm systems, and that's usually about 12 years. 34 campuses show some fire alarm systems that will surpass that lifespan within the next 5 years, and those are listed here. Fire sprinklers. Due to construction dates, 22 of the facilities have no form of fire protection installed, and that list is indicated here. There are some others that had some additions that were fire sprinkled when they were made, but the remainder of the building lacks those. And in order to comply with the current building codes, we would recommend that you add fire sprinklers to these campuses as well. And then there were 4 campuses which were identified to have a fire sprinkler head that was on a manufacturer's recall that should probably be addressed as well. We listed roofs. There were some roofs that variety of roof work. Some required full replacement to partial, and some to general maintenance. So the full roof replacement recommendation occurs at these campuses. Partial roof replacements at these campuses. And then there's some general maintenance items such as scupper installations, roof drain relocations, skylight replacements, things of that nature at 4 campuses. In the kitchens, all the campuses had several pieces of food service equipment that have reached their serviceable lifespan. Approximately 70% of the campuses within the food service equipment is in good condition. Within that 70%, there are some pieces that need to be replaced, and the remaining 30% will replace a medium to extensive replacement of food service equipment. And so with that, we went in and we talked about different cost summaries, and so we kind of brought you the full ride, if you will, of the district facilities, and we broke that down by the level of the campus and the type of facility it was. We broke it down into renovation improvements, which would just address some of the kinds of things that we saw that needed renovation. Some things that would bring it up to TEA standards, and those were listed at each campus, and then a total. And then to bring it up in compliance with the full standards that were developed working with your curriculum folks of what an elementary school ought to be, and what a middle school ought to be, and what a high school ought to be. Those numbers were indicated here. Then after that, we went, after we made that presentation, we were asked what are some of the priorities that you might want to look at. And so we had 4 different areas that we looked at in general. And so that began with safety and security. And within that, we talked about access control, video, fire alarms. We talked about secured vestibules, ADA and door hardware. We talked about ADA restrooms. We talked about structural, and we talked about sprinklers. And so those numbers were listed here. Then we talked about building systems, which were the MEP, the plumbing, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and sprinkler systems, the roof systems, the window systems, and the floor, and then some paint systems throughout the buildings. We talked about technology and some numbers for that, and so those are indicated here. And one thing that came up a little later in the process was the idea of including some one-to-one devices at the high school and middle school level, and so we made some adjustments to that, and we've indicated those numbers here. You're seeing that again indicated here. And then there were some more special type projects or kind of district-wide initiatives, if you will, that had been discussed, and those included a career and tech center, a natatorium, band and choir additions at the middle school and high school level, and then there were some proposals for some 7 turf fields at the high school level. And so those all subtotaled, and that came up to $489 million. On top of that, there are some miscellaneous costs that we discussed previously with regard to a bond, the bond fees, some bond contingency dollars, no dollars in there for site acquisition, as I believe you all have sites sufficient to do any of the additional new campuses that you may desire. And then some contingency for off-site utilities that couldn't be defined at this point for another $8.5 million to bring that total up just under $500 million at $498,212,000. Then we also just to talk about a little bit, as I know there's some questions about a May or November bond. And so we just compared kind of what that inflation cost would do to you, and you can kind of see there on the on the left-hand side is the May cost, which is where we've been kind of calculating everything on. And then we looked at what the escalation of costs would do to you if we went to a November bond, and it was about $20 million extra to handle that inflationary cost. And so that's what this page reflects. So our conclusions were that the entire cost of renovations will be based on further evaluation of comprehensive standards for all facilities. The final numbers may be a composite of many costs built on multiple standards for today's educational environment. Prior to executing the work, we want to design a long-term district-wide master plan for facilities based on assessment data, which mirrors the strategic master plan. As you all know, you're going through a master planning process right now, and there's probably some weaving between the two things that needs to occur so that we can make sure that the money that you spend today is spent wisely on those facilities that tie in with that overall master plan. And then also the implementation of consistent standards to deliver some level of equity across all campuses, regardless of the age or the location of that campus within the district. So that's kind of bring us all up to speed, I think, of all the things we've talked about in general terms and gotten you back to where we are tonight.
Before we go to questions to Mr. Drone, he indicated that the facilities assessment is on our website. Let me tell you where to find that. If you just go to garlandisd.net, along the top of the masthead, it says Departments and Programs. If you click on that and go to Facilities and Maintenance, and the left-hand column on Facilities and Maintenance, it says Facilities Assessment. It's that easy to find. And the whole report is there.
Yes, sir.
That was presented to us in December.
Yes, sir.
Anybody have any questions at this point? Ms.
Yes, I
Griffin?
do. If you'd go to page 41, it's the summary of costs, and it's the priority list when we start with our first section, which talks about safety and security.
Mm-hmm.
What's the significance of the footnotes that are listed?
Those actually tie all the way across all the different priority lists. And so some of those tie back to, like you can see here in the very first column, the access control video fire. This is just a footnote to tell you what's included with that particular section. Footnote number 2.
See, I was really interested in things like if this is security and safety, would we be considering in security and safety technology refresh, the CTE, the natatorium, the cost of support services? I'm trying to see what's in each of those columns just for security and safety. So we go back to your previous slides and we know how many elementary campuses or how many campuses, period, needed the secure vestibules. And then we can go back to those individual slides and we can get that total for the ADA door hardware and then ADA restroom. So somewhere, was the door hardware ADA always included? So do we always have the ADA restroom and the door hardware?
On this priority list, we did. Yes,
You
ma'am.
did, okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, these categories, except at the technology where we added the one-to-one devices at the middle and high school, have remained consistent since we first showed this to you in January, in the first part of January. I don't remember which meeting that was, if it was the 14th, I think.
Yes.
What is the total cost of just security and safety? Is that somewhere it seemed like we add all
But
the
just
numbers?
these categories, we'd add those bottom numbers.
Bottom numbers
And
to-
then there's some other parts of the final sheet there on the miscellaneous costs we'd have to factor in as well, but that's pretty minor. That would be,
I think it's about 125 million.
yeah, okay. I believe you. Short of adding it up, you want me to?
Okay, and
Work on that number?
I was just trying to get the totals on each of these categories, safety and security, building system,
Okay.
priority, and I was,
Well, while we talk, I'm gonna ask Heather to
okay.
put those
that's-
numbers together for me.
That's fine.
Just one, Ms. Griffin, for those who are standing, we have some seats here in the front and in the aisles, if you'd like to come and have a seat, please.
And I'm asking the question because on our spreads, we have broken it down into these 4 categories. I think we have the supportive slides to tell us which campuses and whatever, but I'd like to know for each of those categories, what is that number?
Okay.
Okay, and not add it in everywhere.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions, Ms. Griffin? Mr. Axe?
I can tell you honestly that until the last week or so, I hadn't really looked in detail at the line items that you presented. And the first thing I want to say is that it's extremely impressive. Your folks really did walk all over every one of these buildings and campuses. And the question I had is, for instance, I noticed that in a lot of the buildings, there was some problem with paving, both on sidewalks and on parking areas. Which area of this would that be covered in? Is it in the systems?
Where we would pick that up would be in some of our ADA
Okay.
items, perhaps in the,
Not buildings.
but it's not, I'm not dealing with paving issues across the campus, and I don't have, in some places, there's some floors that have subsided or
Right.
whatever inside. I don't have those picked up in here either. There's
Okay.
gonna be some that'll be picked up by the nature of the work, but not holistically across the district. And that's one thing, the challenge is you could fix those today, and it could be a problem tomorrow when the soil moves again. And, trying to slabjack those slabs to bring those up, you could have some movement in that slab again another day. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's something you do here.
Okay.
That may be more of a maintenance type of thing, unless unless we can solve the problem, it will potentially continue. And short of building a structural slab underneath there and getting it off the dirt, I'm probably not going to stop that issue.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Castaneda?
Thank you. Thanks again for your presentation. It's always good to have another review of that. And so, just to be even more specific, some of these are just compulsory compliance issues that just have to be taken care of, because when we're talking about ADA and you're talking about a significant amount of renovations, those are things we must do in order to provide access for our
Yes, ma'am.
campuses. So some of these we must undertake.
Yes, ma'am.
And then the other ones, we may have more latitude in terms of timing and pacing and sequencing as well. When we're thinking about this, your extensive report, and I know that's a piece of this, how do you suggest that we undertake the deferred maintenance issue? Because it seems like a lot of these are really deferred maintenance issues, and I know that all higher ed institutions as well as K-12 systems that's our constant burden, is how do we deal with the deferred maintenance? Because some of these things are just timing issues, even when we get later to the technology stuff. So how can we further plan to build in for the maintenance of these new and renovated facilities as we go forward?
So you're asking me how you would plan for that in the future? I guess what I would do is, as we, in working with the maintenance group, there's probably some things we can identify out of the report that they could begin to use that report as a planning document going forward. And one of the things we tried to look at is we looked at the age of some of the equipment. Some of that equipment, there's going to be equipment that after this 5 years that needs to be replaced, but we've got a listing now that identifies its age and when it's going to go out of, when it's going to be nearing its life expectancy. And you could begin to use that as a planning document for planning your future maintenance expenditures. And I'm sure that the district already does a lot of that. I know they already do a lot of that. They know the ages of their equipment, and they do that. It's just a lot of times in a bond, you pick that stuff up when the timing matches. Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Mr. Lambert? No. Thank you, and we'll probably have some additional questions when we get into the next phase.
And I will get Mrs. Griffin's question answered here shortly.
Yes, Ms. Griffin.
Let's talk about time frame. Say we undertake the security and safety and the building systems, and you all have walked all of the campuses. How would you see us? What's the time frame of starting work and completing work?
My first thought is to try to do as much as we can when students are not in the building. So try to focus summers as much as we can for the work. The challenge is going to be with this much work, you're not going to be able to fit it all into summers real cleanly and get it all done in the 5-year window that we're kind of looking at.
And is secure vestibules something that can be done in a summer?
I believe that as a task, yes, ma'am, that one can be completed in the summer.
So it's about setting priorities and then deciding which ones we can handle,
Right.
in a given summer.
I think what we want to try to do is to set those up so that the things that disturb students on the inside of the building are the things that we're trying to accomplish in a summer, so that those students are out of there on June 8th or whatever the date is, and they're coming back on August 26th. That's our window to get some of these items done inside of a building. And I would say that would be true with restroom renovations, with door hardware, with security systems, things of that nature. It's just not going to be physically possible for everything to fit in a summer. The duration of a lot of the work could probably fit into a summer, but it's just not going to be possible to do it all in the summer each time.
And what types of this renovation would be done during the course of the school year while our students are on campus and staff's on campus?
I think that probably, I don't want to do any of it when the students are on.
Okay,
on
that's
site.
fine. And I just,
That's
for
really
me,
where I want to be, but I don't think that's possible. So I don't have a good answer which ones we ought to push. You know,
Okay.
a roof or something on the exterior, or something where we can assign areas that the students wouldn't be in, and maybe a window replacement or something. If we can do some of that where the students aren't in a portion of a facility, or work with the staff to rotate and move kids out of a building or out of a room so they can have that room for a day, and something like that. Maybe a way to look at that.
but
I don't-
really, in reality, most of this work needs to be done when our campuses are
You really want it to
empty.
be, yes, ma'am.
Which is another timing issue of when we can get things done.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
And I think that becomes an issue of management as well from the district standpoint. We have a lot of planning to do between, August and March, so we can bid it in March and be ready to hit the ground running on June and get done by August. And having the involvement of the district, working with us and making sure we've covered all the right bases in that project, that will be real critical to our success on this.
Thank you, and we may have some questions
Okay.
in the next phase. Again, if you're standing outside, we have plenty of seats here in the front if you'd like to come in. One of the sections that we have not spoken about at length is the technology portion, which is about $50 million. I'll ask Mr. Heisar, our Director of Technology, to come and discuss what makes up that $50 million and maybe some additional inputs that we've talked about.
Okay, is it in your packet? Did you receive a spreadsheet? If not, I handed out an Outlook presentation. The reason I gave you the spreadsheet is because I made an error on the presentation. It was only $1 million, so it'll show up. Okay, if you look at the presentation, basically, you're looking at a technology request for $50,000. Now, 50 million. I did that earlier today, didn't I? I did that in the cabinet. In 2002, 2004 bond, we went for $57 million. The interesting thing about the difference between that bond is that we didn't have anything. Now we have a lot of things, okay? And those lot of things are nearing their end of life. So realistically, this bond is simply to take care of upgrading a bunch of our existing equipment and moving us forward and getting us ready for the future. So the first page shows you end-of-life student-teacher admin devices. The interesting thing about this slide, if you look at the Apple laptop and mobile device refresh, in November, when we initially did the proposal, that number was 5,956 Apple devices. Today, we have on order and will receive by March 11,819 devices. So the end-of-life student-teacher admin device number is a moving target and a moving number. It includes the laptops. It includes everything that was bought by Title I monies. It includes a PC refresh. And as you remember, we've always been able to make our computers last 5 years. We have computers that are in this district upwards to 6 and 7 years old, and we're using spare parts to replace those computers. So that's been a good investment. Laptops last about 3 years, and one of the biggest problems with laptops are batteries. They don't make the batteries for them anymore. They last about 3 years and then they go away. Apple devices don't have a track record in the industry yet, but they usually last between 3 and 4 years. They go end of life because they change the operating system. The iPod, anybody have an iPod anymore? No? Okay. Your networks and local printers have a life cycle of about 6-7 years. And then we have projectors. In the district, we have one projector in every classroom. The good thing about the projectors is that they're basically almost brand new. They're their oldest one's probably about 12 months old. So theoretically, your replacement cycle on them is anywhere between 5 to 7 years. Now, we built the projector replacement into this plan because this is a 5-year plan. One of the things you can do with this plan, we are now in the midst of putting together a strategic plan. That strategic plan includes digital devices. Let's say the strategic plan says, I really would like to have a device in front of the classroom that I could manipulate. Okay, I can use the projector to manipulate items, see slides, do math. You can buy that device right now today, 74 inches, for $1,000 and put it in the classroom. So those are things that you can add to this end-of-life strategy, okay, if you take a look at the long-term projections. One of the things we haven't done in a long time is replace all of our servers, our UPSs, our Cisco devices. Most of the servers are anywhere between 7 to 8 years old. Some of the Cisco gear is 10 years old. The UPSs are about 10 years old, and their UPSs are the battery backup systems that we use, and they usually send an error message to us when something's going wrong. They're getting to the age now to where I guess they just forget because they're not sending us error messages. So this is about 12.1. The next thing on our list is video delivery. This district uses Safari Montage extensively in the classroom. We have thousands of hours of digital instruction. One of the neat things that we did with the video delivery system that was unexpected was morning announcements. Talk to the principals about their morning announcements. All over the district, you're shaking your head because you've seen some of them. They're using all kinds of video equipment. That video equipment is now about 4 to 5 years old, and it's time for it to change. It's also time to work with them. Some of them are using higher-end switching gear, and they're using green screen. Some of them are just using standard technologies. So we're going to put 2 or 3 plans together for each school and let them decide how they want to do their announcements. Novell to Microsoft conversion. In this instance, we projected that it would cost us about $1 million to make the conversion from Novell to Microsoft. Dr. Morrison put a carrot out there to my department and said, we need to switch to Outlook and we need to do it now. Put that carrot out there. We went for that carrot. We've been switching the district over to the email system Outlook, and in the process of doing that, we've learned that we may be able to save the district some money on the Microsoft conversion. We've learned about some tools, we've learned about some capabilities, and we have some enhanced capabilities within our staff so that we may be able to purchase some software before the bond that helps us initiate the conversion. And basically, this money I'm looking to save you about $500,000, I'm pretty sure, because I'm going to buy 500 on the front end in M&O monies if all goes well. We can take this $1 million and we can put it into student devices. The next thing, and on your sheet it shows number 6, and that's the backbone fiber infrastructure upgrade. That's the error. That should be $2 million. I put a placeholder of $1 million in there, and I kept it $1 million. It's $2 million on your spreadsheet. Basically, when we replace the Cisco switches with new technology, it's faster. And the 50 micron fiber will make the network faster. We'll be able to work at speeds of up to 100 gigabytes. And then we have some places out in the district to where our closets are just too small. The air conditioning is just not right. If you talk to Huckabee about those things, they saw all those things. And so we put some of those facilities costs into our bond because it's just a little piece of the campus. And finally, what's probably the most important item. There is mobility. There's this mobility. There's a big movement of mobility. Everywhere you go, you want to take your computer and you don't want it to be wired. You don't want it to be connected. If you remember, when we first initiated wireless in the district, we started out with just a couple campuses. Those campuses were Beaver, Watson, Jackson, and then the hallways in North. And we figured out that, wow, this is a neat thing. They're using these tools. They're using this technology all over the place. And so we started adding it to the other schools. And we started out at 4-to-1 classrooms, 4 classrooms to 1. And then some schools bought more technology. They used Title I to buy more technology, and they bought more technology. And so we switched it to 2-to-1. And so now we figured out that we're going to have 1-to-1 if the decision is made to give students devices to be used in the classroom. If the decision is made for us to bring your own device to the classroom, think about the number of devices you're now going to have in the classroom. All you have to do is take the number of students in the secondary or the middle or the elementary and make the decision which of those people are going to have their own device or going to have a district assigned device. And those numbers end up being thousands and thousands, 40, 50,000 potentially. Okay? So once we get this implemented, you will have full 1-to-1 technology for the entire district. And the beautiful thing is that there's a new standard, finally. It just got approved. We've been working on it for 2 years to watching the industry. There's a standard called 802.11ac, and it allows the waves to work in a broader spectrum, and it allows more devices to connect to more access points, and it also allows the access point to be smart enough to know when it's full, it can share. That's the beauty of what we're moving toward. So with that, I believe I'll open the floor to questions. It totaled $50 million.
Before we get to questions, would you talk about the potential costs of adding the one-on-one devices at the middle school or the high school level? And is this package of the $50 million, I think you indicated that would cover the ability for all those devices to work? Is that what you're saying?
It covers them to work, but it does not cover the devices themselves.
Okay.
I basically built you an end-of-life bond technology plan. One of the things you can do is you've got to decide what type devices you're going to use. You've got to decide how you're going to use the devices. And then it's simple math. You take the device. Which one is it? Is it the Chromebook? Is it the iPad? Is it the Kindle? Okay, if you want to do books, read books, buy the Kindle Fire, $299. If you want to do more with it, you use the iPad. It's $399 to $599. And then you multiply that out times the number of students, and that's where Huckabee got their number. I believe their number was 12.
12
Yeah,
middle
12.
and 12 high school.
Yeah, they took the middle. So we basically took the middle school students. I've got the infrastructure. We add whatever software that you want them to access. We add the cost of the software. We add the cost of the device. We multiply it times the number of students, and it's basically simple math, and it will work in this environment.
Okay, questions for Mr. Heisel? Mr. Lambert?
Mr. Highsall, you mentioned that you built an end-of-life presentation with regard to the technology, and we've talked about that, and we've talked a little bit about what it would cost to provide devices for all students or particular levels of students. Would you talk about what's not in this presentation with regard to technology needs that you're not including?
Oh, okay. Yeah, there are a few items that that are, I guess we call them a wish list. One of the things that's happening in the district, one of the beauties of the network that you have is if they happen to be building a new road, and they built a whole bunch of roads here lately, and a backhoe happens to cut our fiber, guess what? You never know it. You never know it because it fails and it transfers itself to one of the other hubs, and everything works just like normal. Except for there's about 14 locations that when we were doing the right-of-way, we could not obtain right-of-way. Now, those locations are located on the outskirts. There's not a whole lot of new construction going on. I have not had any problems since 2004, since the network was turned on, with any of those. So that's one item. Another, and off the top of my head, I don't remember the actual number, but our actual number here with all of those priorities was $62 million, 62 to 64 million. Another item is a disaster recovery item, okay? One of the things we attempted to do was build a disaster recovery plan down at the federal building. And when I say disaster recovery, I'm really just backing up all of your data and trying to give you a live refresh. Right now, we take the data off-site on tapes. So if something were to happen, I'd have to reconstruct the servers somewhere. Now, I can do that in a fairly timely manner, but I've still got to do it. Now, one of the things I could do is pick another hub site, build an off-site virtual location, and if you can put a server over in that room and a server over in that room, and they don't know that they're in different rooms, and I can make them talk. But there's a cost to that. So I've got disaster recovery. I've got the hubs, and off the top of my head, those are the main ones that come to mind.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Castaneda?
And I've got a listing of the full items if you guys need that.
Just to make sure I heard you right, because I'm still getting over a cold, so I'm kind of deaf in one ear today. You said that the software costs were not included in the costs that you presented to us?
The software costs,
If we went to the additional devices,
yes,
right, it would come with software costs presumably.
there would be software costs. Now, it depends on, if you're using iPads, usually what happens is they load apps, and sometimes you can fund the apps based on department, or based on the district, or based on the need. Some of the apps are actually out in the cloud, and instruction will just choose the software they want to use, and we can just go access it. And we can access it. If it's out in the cloud and it's district-wide, you can access it with any device.
And then my other question was, is there one of the things that was in the State of the Union was regarding potential increased funding for K-12 schools to increase internet connections. Is there
Right.
any word from your field that you're hearing about potential federal grants in that area?
Well, I have not heard federal grants, but we should be. They're playing a game with E-rate this year, and we usually get about $10 million worth of E-rate funding, and what that helps us do is in every 5 years I can go for E-rate twice. This is my second try to go for E-rate. We have in place. We're ready to pull the trigger. Bless you, on about $12 million worth of E-rate funding, and that would supplement. We always use that for infrastructure, and then yearly we get money back from E-rate for phones and internet services. So, yeah.
Explain the E-rate program, please.
If you look at your phone bill very, very, very closely, and I mean you really have to look at it closely, and it's usually on the last page, and it's in really small text, you give to the E-rate fund, and it's like 50 cents or $1 or something like that. And what you're giving to are schools that have the highest free and reduced lunch program. So basically, Garland ISD is eligible for about 24 or 25 schools when you add it up, because they only fund about 85 percentile when they do the E-rate funding. So something like Dallas ISD would get a much larger funding model than we have.
And there was just an article recently that Dallas ISD is back into the E-rate program after being out of several years.
Oh, yeah, they had a little trouble.
Yes.
I'm proud to say that we've had no trouble.
Right. And it's a federal program.
And it's a federal program.
Ms. Griffin?
When you look at the one-on-one devices,
Yes.
how do you see that working in terms of policies that would have to be in place? Do you see the one-on-one devices only in the classrooms, or would those be assigned to students? And if students are taking them home, what do you see as a digital divide with connectivity if we're taking those home to complete project work and coursework or assignments?
Okay.
What do you thought about that?
Yeah, let me kind of answer that. There's multiple solutions to that. Okay. One of the things that you want to do is make the decision: do I want to manage that device 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year? In other words, if a student takes a device home, do I want to manage what they're connecting to? And almost all school districts go, yeah, I want to manage what they connect to. So the first thing you do is you manage the software. If you're going to send the device home with a student, you manage their access by diverting. If they get on the wireless at their house, then you divert their access to be at the school, and they run through our filter. Now, the second thing that you deal with is the discrepancy in the person's ability to have internet. They may not have internet at their house. And what we're looking at is some school districts put together programs that allow businesses to help fund a low-cost internet connectivity to the house. Okay? Another option is the students check the device out. They can buy insurance for the device. And obviously, we've been looking at Mansfield ISD's plan. We've also been looking at Louisville's ISD plan. We've been looking at all of the different plans across the state of Texas on how they're using the device. Almost all the schools are managing them. There is a discrepancy when they take them home with, do you have internet or do you not have internet? We're a fairly blue-collar community. That may be an issue, and one of the things we need to find out is how much internet connectivity do they have at the home. And I think you'd be surprised, because most of our students, when we did a survey, have a cell phone of sorts that they use. And so even if you have cell phones and you create the environment, you can give them access through their own devices. So it's a dilemma that really the instructional folks are going to guide technology through this process. They're going to say, this is the thing we want to teach. How best do we need to teach it? And then we're going to point them to which device we think will work. And we're trying to build a very, very device agnostic network so that it really doesn't matter.
Dr. Morrison?
Just to add a few comments, and I think Mr. Highsall is correct on several of the things he mentioned. Having been in another district and also been a parent in a district who had a high school student with one of these devices, the software that you load into this does not allow the students to go to sites that are inappropriate. If they attempt to go to those sites, it automatically flags your technology department, and those students are redirected the next day with the assistant principal's help on not to go to those sites anymore. In addition to that, in a district like this, as far as the size, because of the scope, 94 square miles, one of the things we did for the students in the previous district is we kept one of our high school libraries open. I would suggest the size of this district, maybe 2 high school libraries were open Monday through Thursday night for students to have access. If they had a project to work on, they could actually go to the library. It wouldn't necessarily be their home library. The students would have a schedule of that. So there's ways for students to meet the needs. And of course, as everybody knows, every McDonald's and Starbucks has free wireless. And so a lot of the students at the high schools usually migrate to those cyber cafes because they're doing group projects and or their parents drop them off and those kinds of things. So connectivity, there's so much of it free out there, but we also provided opportunities at the schools for the students. But I think the first and foremost is that was when we're talking about one-on-one, you would want to start this at high school first and ease into potentially middle school. You can offer them in middle school, but I think middle school would be more classroom sets. I'm not sure middle school kids have the maturity to take that device home.
Any other questions, Mr. Highsaw? Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
We're now going to go into item 4, which is our workshop session, which is discuss the potential bond program. Just some history, as Mr. Drone indicated, we started this process in April of 2013 when we hired Huckabee to do an assessment. That assessment went on through the summer, through the fall, into the winter, till we got our first look at the official assessment in December. We're now at the position where we have to decide very quickly if we're going to have a bond issue that would be on the May 10th ballot. Our deadline date is February 28th. We do have a meeting next week on Tuesday. Again, that's a regularly scheduled meeting that does include a public forum, as I indicated at the beginning of this session. The decision will be based on some of the comments we make this evening as to whether we will proceed. Certain documents have to be drawn up by our attorneys, ready to be voted on, and then go on by the 28th. However, the other option we have is to look at other dates. The next election that would be available for a bond for this district would be in November, the November 4th election day. Our cutoff date for that is August 18th. So we have about a 6-month window. If we decide not to do it this week and next week, we would have a little under 6 months to come to our next deadline. We don't have to do that either. We could go into the next year. You heard from Mr. Drone indicating that the costs keep going up. It's inflation. We know that. The longer we delay, the longer the fact that we'll be having interest costs and cost of living that decreases what we can accomplish actually in a bond issue. So we've seen the different categories. We've narrowed down a $1 billion figure to somewhere around $400 and $500 million. We've talked about items that must be done. I think there's no doubt that some items have to be done. We've talked about some items that have been included that we've seen in our survey. Some of the people being surveyed said they're not as interested in those items as other items, but we need to talk about this and come to some type of conclusion, I believe, this evening. So, does anybody want to start the discussion? Mr. Axe.
First, a question. Is it my assumption that we should discuss the timing of the bond issue before we get into what we want on it and what we do not want on it?
I think we can go either direction. We've really never talked about specifics, but on the other hand, if the consensus as we go around is that the timing is more appropriate for a later date, then I think we can delay some of that and get more information. So it's really your choice, which direction you want to go.
Mr. Glick, I would like to ask another question. What are all the tasks needed to be done, identified, or completed before a bond can be called?
Well, why don't we have our experts, Mr. Drone or Mr. Huckabee, would you like to address that? Mr. Huckabee, thank you very much, sir.
Good evening. It's a broad question. You've done a lot of those. So far, you've got your data. You have to narrow down the list. I think as a board, you have to be in agreement with where you want to go. And of course, there's a lot of legal filings and things that your president just spoke of. Those are the things that you have to do legally. Obviously, there's just processes that have to be followed. Those things you have to do. Beyond that, as a board and as a district, you need to inform your citizens. You need to get out. You can't advocate, but you need to get out and you need to share the information of what would be in a bond referendum. You need to let your taxpayers know what's out there. And that work takes place from the time you would call the election to the time the election would vote, obviously before early voting. And so the district has work to do as far as getting information out. You've done a good job so far of doing public forums, and actually I think they've been fairly well attended. Good questions. I think people have been fairly engaged in the process. What I would say tonight, the biggest question is you guys have to decide if you're all on the same page. I would say that's a vitally important thing. If you aren't all on the same page, I think that's a problematic. If you have more questions, if you need more information, either we need to get you that information, or you need to sit down and talk together and figure out what the issue is. And those may be things beyond just the data that we've provided. As Mr. Axe said, it's pretty overwhelming when you really get into it and decide. And then the second thing, again, would be to decide what your list is. It's a very large list. We've narrowed it down. Keep in mind, this assessment was a 10-year snapshot of your district. What we've really done is peeled off one, honestly, very simple priority list, which is just the highest priority items that would just need to be done. And that's really what the list is in front of you. That won't be the end. That's really just the beginning, is kind of get those items out of the way and then sit down and take your strategic plan and take your needs in the district and say what would be next beyond that. You can do that now, or you could do that in the months to come. But at some point, you've got to go beyond just what I would call the priority one, what I would say is the obvious. I mean, I think what we've presented are the obvious items, but that's not all that's in that assessment, as you know. Yes,
Any
ma'am.
other questions? Mr. Axe again.
I don't have a question for Mr. Huckabee. I was just going to offer my thoughts at this point, if that's what we're doing.
Yes, sir.
I don't think that we can say that securing our campuses for the safety of our kids is anything that we could possibly decide not to do. I don't think that it makes any common sense to sit around and wait for roofs and air conditioners and electrical systems to fail and then try to fix them on a piecemeal basis. I think that'll wind up costing the district more and also will disrupt instruction rather severely. I am concerned with the time pressure, and while I know that it would take probably a year before we start seeing these things be finished once we get them in the mill, it still worries me. I don't want to rush this into action without having the opportunity to make sure that our citizens understand what's in this bond election, that protecting our campuses from having intruders walk in off the street and having door locks so the teachers don't have to go out into the hall with the key to lock the door if there's a lockdown. I don't think those are things that are debatable, really. And but I think that probably the majority of the citizens of this school district probably don't really know what we're thinking about doing in this election. And if we do it, I think we need to thoroughly prepare. And I'm a little concerned about whether we have time to do that before May.
Ms. Griffin?
Last week, we received a survey result. And that was something that was initiated by the board, and we asked the superintendent to get that done, and we brought in a company to do that. And they brought us the results, and we saw those results. In Garland, we've always put children first. So I think the discussion tonight is not about we're going to start putting children last. We're going to always put children first. The tasks that have to be done to successfully call the bond election, I don't think we have that entire list before us. I mean, Huckabee has provided some things for us. Having gone through a bond election before in this school district, I know the task, and I know the 3 communities, and I know the amount of work that is involved in reaching all of our citizens in all of the Tri-Cities. I just don't know if we're even capable of trying to get all of that done between now and May, even if we look at calling that we only start the process after we call the election. So that's February 28th. Then we have March, and then we have April for all practical purposes. So that's basically 60 days. And I say, can we get all of the work done to make sure that everyone knows what we're doing? And I'm very concerned that I think at this point, I'm not sure that we can get it done. And maybe my trustees can change my mind about that.
Mr. Luna?
Well, I'll have to agree with Mr. Axe and Ms. Griffin. I'm not in favor of doing this right now. I don't think we have enough time. I think even if you wanted to call it for May, you put it on there, you get it. We're not going to be able to do anything this summer. I mean, we'll have a month. So I think the timing is definitely wrong. I'm not for sure when the timing's going to be right, but I don't think it's now. I'm not willing to say it's in November. I'm not willing to say it's next May. I just don't think it's right now.
Thank you. Mr. Lambert?
Mr. Huckabee pointed out that the items that we're really discussing for this first bond election are priority 1 items that are really of no, I don't think many people could disagree that they are absolutely necessary. I think this district at some point must ask the public to support these renovations. But at the same time, if our board is not united in terms of deciding that we do it now, then I think we need to think twice about it. But I will say, from my perspective, we need to do it, and we need to do it as quickly as we can for our students.
Dr. Castaneda?
Thank you. I do have a question for Mr. Huckabee or one of the Huckabee folks, and that has to do with, is there a middle ground between going out for a May bond and the planning that would, if the voters approved it, the planning that would take place between now and whenever the funds were ready to be available and the projects were ready to go, and if the board decided to wait to November to go out for the bond and if the voters approved it? That is, would there be things that steps that we could undertake now for these must-do projects, the ADA, the hardware, those kinds of things, where we could tee things up in the event that when November comes, if we decide to go for a bond then, and if the voters approve it, that it would allow some of the projects to get started in the summer of 2015?
Yes, great question. Let me say this. Can that be done, and has it been done? Yes, because what we would do is advanced planning, and let me say this, I think is important to say. We're still fairly big picture in talking about these, and some great questions were asked tonight about timing and when do you do this, because projects really a lot of times get done at night. And believe it or not, school goes on the next day and projects get done at night. So there are other ways to accomplish that. We're not there yet. Once we know from you this is where we're going, then we're going to start packaging these to make sure they meet a lot of different needs to try to obviously fit contractors and subcontractors in this area, that they can hit the workload, that the timing fits. There's a lot of other things to do. As far as the design time, let me say this. If you do a May bond, you can do a resolution and do some fund balance things and refund fund balance, but you will not have money from a May bond election until probably August at the earliest. Could you do design work up front? Yes. Is that wise? I think you're going to have to ask that question, because if I'm your taxpayer and you turn loose a bunch of design work on something that they haven't not yet approved, even if it's obvious, I don't know that I like that as a taxpayer. I think the proper sequence is you ask me and I tell you yes or no, and then you go forward. So could it be done faster? Yes. Is that wise? I don't think so, because I think we have to respect your taxpayer enough to say, we've got the data, they need to research it themselves, they need to come to the same conclusions, but then they also have to decide, is this the right time? And those may be two different things. And then they'll decide when the right time is, and then things will proceed orderly. I don't know that we'll have to wait until next summer. If you did a May bond, I don't think you'd have to wait until next summer to start seeing things. But to start seeing some things, I think we would wait until the summertime.
What if the board decides that the timing is a November bond, and if the voters approve it, then would that necessarily mean waiting for summer of 16?
No, I think you'd be talking summer of 15, because you'll have your money by the end of the year. We would try to hit, in order to really do summer cycle, believe it or not, the jobs need to be bid in March. And the reason is we'll stockpile material, we'll literally stage, we'll be ready to go, so the day the kids leave, the projects come on. So if you think about that timing, it gives about 2 months to award a project and actually go to work. So under that scenario, a November bond certainly allows you the flexibility to come in during the summer. Keep in mind, our summers are really 2 months, is really all they are. And if it keeps snowing and icing around here, it may be 1 month. And we have to keep that in mind. We are working with what we're working with. So what that would mean, over the summer, you would probably be doing a 2 or 3 shift work period, meaning we'll probably work around the clock in order to do that. Again, those are important things for us all to discuss, because those do impact dollars. If crews are working 3 shifts, obviously, the contractor charges different
How would a
rates.
shortened time frame impact the design quality or end product we might have?
I don't think, in the case of these projects, I don't think it will affect design quality, because they're fairly straightforward. It's going to affect a lot of different trades. Obviously, mechanical will be done by a mechanical engineer, roofing will be done by your roof consultant, so it'll be a lot of different trades, kind of the expert in that design field. So you're going to have a lot of different design folks working on the job, but it's not like, let's take the Career and Technology Academy. You would not accelerate that project, because you want to get the input. You want to do that project in the normal sequence and order for a number of reasons. And one is you want the input from your staff. You want the input to really make sure you're doing that project right. And there would be no benefit to accelerating that into some tightened time frame. Roofs, secured vestibules, things like that could move very quickly through the design process, because they don't need as much input. They're fairly straightforward in the solution.
Okay, thank you. That really helped clarify some things for me, and also hear it from fellow board members did as well. So at this point, I think I'm more inclined to be in favor of waiting for November than I'm calling for May.
I've probably been the trustee pushing the hardest for a bond election for several years now. This is not just something that's happened recently. We are in an environment now that's unheard of in terms of interest rates. We're all affected by interest rates. We all know what we get if we go to a bank and give them some money. We all know if we want to get a mortgage, how beneficial it is. Those same rates affect the amount of money we have to pay for bonds if we issue bonds. The question is, how long will this environment last? Again, like I said, it's unprecedented. We have a new chairman of the Fed, Janet Yellen. I get to read all their minutes. It appears that the Fed is going to continue the policies of Mr. Bernanke, continue on this policy of a low-rate environment for some time. The question is, will outside influences change the interest rates that we're paying? And once they do, my training indicates that interest rates will start to go up very quickly, and the cost of the bond will dramatically increase. So that's what's been driving my pushing this board as hard as I have. The other thing, of course, being security, as Mr. Axe referred to. Now, we did have our survey from Mr. Basilis last week, and he indicated that we might have a better opportunity in November than in May based on who votes and what percentage they vote in. What was interesting, there was an article in the Dallas Morning News this morning titled "Athletic Spending Not Backed in Bond." And I had more emails today than I can imagine, because the article seemed to imply that the survey was not in favor of an natatorium. Well, I heard from more families and students today who were in favor of that. So the issue gets more and more complicated as we look at it. I think, however, as Mr. Huckabee indicated, we need to have a unanimous board if we're going to go forward. And there's been enough comments, I think, this evening indicating we're not ready to go forward. So I would confer and indicate that I would agree with my colleagues that maybe it's not the time to go forward at this point. With the proviso, as I've indicated, that we're playing with fire with interest rates. And the longer we wait, the longer the costs of issuing the bond could go up dramatically. So, any other comments from anybody?
Yes, I want to know those numbers on those 4 categories, because we keep talking about, as we still, I think every trustee agrees that we're going to have to do the priority things on here, but we've added the technology and the CTE and the fine arts, and I'd just like to know what those individual numbers are, because that will change that 498 figure. And then I'd like to ask Dr. Barojas, when that number lowers, if we know what the impact per household as this number changes, because it should be 2 or 3 options on the table.
Ms. Griffin, I'm not sure what numbers you're looking for.
Okay, he was going to give me the total of what security and safety.
Okay, just the totals we have so far. Okay.
Okay, those
okay.
totals, and what's the total for building? Yes.
Okay.
All right.
So by those totals, and I want to be clear, this does not include the miscellaneous costs. We didn't pull those
No.
up into it, but it's just it's $134,993,912 for safety and security. For building systems, it's $186,536,922. For technology, it's $73,980,000. And for the career tech, fine arts and athletics, it was $94,192,605.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, anybody else have any other questions? Mr. Axe?
Yes, sir.
This was a really hard thing for me to think about, because I don't want to delay the safety things 1 minute more than we have to. I'm far more concerned with some horrible event happening than I am with the interest rates. But I don't see any option, and it really made me feel good to hear that we're still going to be looking at possibly beginning these things in the summer of 15. I think that's very important that we make sure that we don't wait any later than that to begin these kinds of things. So I'm very encouraged to hear that.
Dr. Castaneda?
Thank you. President Glick, I wasn't sure if this was also the opportunity for us to discuss or hear from those trustees that went to the other sites to visit, because there were some site visits that some of the trustees went on to. And I don't think we've had the opportunity we've all had the opportunity to hear how those visits went or what the impressions were.
No, we could do that now if you'd like.
Okay,
So.
and one more thing. if I
Yes,
might.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. And the second thing is I do think that the advantage of waiting to November is it gives us opportunities to further explore and refine some of these elements that we might consider. What would be in the CTE center because there was a lot of community support for that. What kinds of programs would that look like? What would the timing look like for that? What advanced things might be there? How would it enhance the program and support the program that we have? And also then to gather more input from our constituents and really from the Tri-Cities, if we were to continue to explore the possibility of an auditorium, what kinds of programs might be shared with the community? What kind of partnerships might we undertake if that's another area that we wanted to go to, and to further refine the elements that might go into a bond if we decide to go forward in November.
So last Tuesday, the superintendent, Mr. Axe, and myself visited two sites, the Dubisky Career High School at Grand Prairie School District, and then went over to Rockwall to visit their natatorium. Then on Thursday, Mr. Axe, myself, and Dr. Gilbreth, who's head of our CTE program, went to Capel to visit their New Tech High School. Mr. Axe, do you want to make a comment?
Well, these were all the facilities were very impressive facilities, and they have very good programs there. The Grand Prairie Career Tech School is a massive program with 1,500 full-time students, and they have some really great. Saw some really good room designs and layouts and some programs that I think would be really beneficial for Garland kids. I'm not sure we need a separate school so that the students don't have a home high school other than that school, and I think that's what Grand Prairie is doing, and that's what they intended all along, was that the kids that went to that school would graduate from that school and not from any of the other schools in town. The New Tech High School is an interesting concept. I'm not sure exactly how applicable it is to Garland, but the great thing about it was riding over in there and back with Dr. Gilbreth, because I learned a great deal about what we're doing in Garland now and what we can do in the future, and I think that New Tech is a good idea. It works for Capel for a particular reason that we don't have here in Garland, and we could probably maybe take some cues in some of their instructional plans and things of that nature, but I don't think it's what we're looking at really. As far as the natatorium is concerned, yes, my daughter was a swimmer at Garland High School and was the first swimmer at Garland High School. And I've always felt that we were letting our elementary kids down by not teaching them to swim. We have far too many drownings in North Texas because kids don't have the opportunity to be tested and learn if they're water safe or not, and to put those kids in the water early. Having said that, I'm not sure that it's up there. In fact, I'm sure it's not up there with the safety and the maintenance things that have to be done to our buildings. I would like to encourage it, but and you know, it's ridiculous that we don't have anywhere, public or private, a competition pool indoors in the Garland ISD. I went to visit my daughter in Minnesota this past summer. Drove through a little town of 296 people, and on the square was a sign pointing to the natatorium. They don't have drownings in their lakes up there like we do down here. Rich kids, their parents will give them swim lessons. Our low-income kids, they're at risk, and that worries me.
Thank you. I think the thing that impressed Mr. Axe and myself with Dubisky and Grand Prairie was the thought that career in tech means something different today than when I was growing up. 95% of the people from Dubisky, and this is their 7th year of operation, go on to either the military, 2-year college, or 4-year college, and some amazing, amazing success stories there. This is training for future jobs, but it's also future training that will lead you to high-paying careers. It's not what we might think it is. And although we have recently done expansions in North Garland, we added a medical wing. We moved welding and auto body work to magnificent facilities at South Garland. There are still many, many career paths that we saw at Dubisky that would be excellent for our students. And I'm amazed, everybody who I've mentioned a career type of high school to, every single person, all 3 communities that we serve, has been highly in favor of it. As to the natatorium, we've heard the comments. The article in the paper today was kind of interesting, indicating that it's always been, in this district, it's been the last thing taken out. There's never been a bond that actually included a natatorium. Other districts have tried and failed. Others have then included it. It's an interesting topic. My own personal thoughts on a natatorium, and I'm going to say when we go ahead with a bond issue, would be to have it as a separate item. I think an up and down vote on that particularly would make most sense to me as an individual. So, any other comments? Okay, I think we have a sense, I want to make sure I'm correct, that we are not going to go ahead with a May vote. Is that correct, sir? Okay, so I'm going to direct staff not to prepare any documents, but to keep this as an ongoing agenda item. As Dr. Castaneda said, we must keep it alive. We must be looking for projects to move ahead and be ready, assuming we go in November. That process would start, we'd have to have, like I indicated earlier, we'd have to call it by August 18th. Information indicates that we would be ready to sell the bonds in February of 2015, and at that point be ready to go with projects as soon as possible after that. Is everybody in agreement? Okay. Nothing else. We do have a meeting next Tuesday. It is a regular scheduled meeting. There will be citizens' input, public forum. If you have any comments, we'd love to hear them. If not, is there a motion for adjournment? We are adjourned. Thank you very much for coming out this evening.